Welcome to Deep Thoughts, a podcast designed to take you on an introspective journey into the mindsets and strategies that fuel personal growth. In every episode, we'll explore the intersection of psychology, spirituality, and real-world tactics, guiding you through powerful methods to elevate your health, wealth, relationships, and overall well-being. From deep dives into transformative habits and mindsets to candid discussions about the challenges we face in today's fast-paced world, Deep Thoughts is here to remind you of the untapped potential that lies within. If you're ready to disconnect from the distractions and connect with the tools and insights needed to create lasting change, this show is your sanctuary for self-discovery and empowerment. Tune in, reflect, and take action towards a more vibrant and fulfilling life.
So today we're going to cut through the noise.
Okay.
And we're going to uncover what dopamine truly does in our brains.
Okay.
It's much more than just a feel-good chemical.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too when I was reading these articles.
Yeah.
Like one of the sources even described it as our brain's internal guidance system.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
Yeah.
Like, does dopamine actually help us make decisions?
It absolutely does.
Oh.
Think about it this way.
Okay.
Dopamine is released in our brains not just when we experience something pleasurable, but also when we anticipate it.
Okay.
So let's say you're really looking forward to that vacation you've planned.
Oh, yeah.
Even just thinking about it can give you a little dopamine surge.
I can feel it now.
Right.
Like a little burst of excitement to push you through the last couple days at work.
Exactly. And that's dopamine motivating you towards a future reward. But it gets even more interesting. A study from the NIH showed that dopamine levels in a specific part of the brain, the caudate nucleus,
The what?
caudate nucleus, influence how we weigh the effort required for a task against the potential reward.
Wait, so you're telling me some people are wired to be more drawn to those challenging projects
Yeah.
that have big payoffs?
It really seems that way.
Wow.
The study found that individuals with higher dopamine levels in that area were more likely to go for tougher tasks that promised bigger rewards.
So, like, that makes me think of those times when I've been super motivated to tackle a tough project. Like, was my dopamine just firing on all cylinders?
It's very possible. Dopamine might be the secret sauce that helps us focus on those long-term goals, even when the going gets tough.
Okay, this is all starting to make sense. But, you know, we've also heard about the flip side of dopamine. It's linked to addiction.
Right.
So how can something that's supposed to be so helpful
Right.
for motivation end up leading us down a path of unhealthy habits?
That's where things get a bit more complex.
Okay.
You see, while dopamine plays a vital role in healthy motivation and pleasure, when it gets out of balance, it can contribute to some pretty unhealthy behaviors.
And the Time article had a really striking example of this, didn't they?
They discussed a patient who became addicted to online shopping
Online shopping.
because of the dopamine rush that came with each new package delivery.
Wow. So each time a package arrived,
It was that anticipation
Yeah.
and then the reward.
wow, that really highlights how those quick hits of dopamine can really hook us even with seemingly harmless activities.
Absolutely. It's not just about the substance or activity itself. It's about how it affects our dopamine system.
Gotcha.
So let's break down why this happens and how we can regain control.
This is where I'm really curious to learn more.
Yeah.
We're talking about things like drugs, obviously, but also potentially everyday things like junk food or excessive social media use.
You got it.
Right.
It's about recognizing the potential for any activity or substance if it triggers excessive dopamine release
Okay.
to lead to those patterns of craving and seeking more. This can, over time, lead to dependence
Yeah.
and even addiction.
So it's not just about enjoying something.
Right.
It's about being mindful of how it might be affecting our dopamine balance in the long run.
Precisely. And as we delve deeper, we'll uncover the fascinating mechanisms behind addiction and explore some practical strategies to help you develop a healthier relationship with dopamine.
Okay, this is getting really interesting.
Good.
So if dopamine can be both beneficial and potentially harmful, is there a way to like hack it to work in our favor?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And thankfully, the answer is yes.
Okay, good.
There are plenty of natural ways to boost your dopamine levels
Okay.
and promote a healthier balance.
I'm all ears.
All right.
What kind of strategies are we talking about?
Well, for starters, let's talk about exercise.
Exercise.
Did you know that physical activity, especially aerobic exercise, has a direct impact on dopamine production?
Well, I always feel amazing after a good workout, right? So it's not just the endorphins.
That's right. It's the dopamine, too.
It is.
And beyond exercise,
Yeah.
We also need to consider the fuel we're giving our brains. A balanced diet, rich in certain amino acids, can play a significant role in dopamine production.
Oh, so all those late-night study sessions fueled by pizza and energy drinks.
Oh.
Probably doing me more harm than good.
Let's just say there are probably more effective ways to support healthy dopamine function. Speaking of effective strategies, let's not forget the importance of quality sleep.
Ah, yes. Sleep deprivation never did anyone any favors.
Nope.
How does it relate to dopamine, though?
When we don't get enough sleep, our dopamine levels take a hit,
Really?
which can leave us feeling sluggish
Yeah.
and unmotivated.
Okay, so exercise, diet, sleep.
Uh-huh.
Are we seeing a theme here?
We are.
It's like taking care of our overall well-being
Yeah.
is crucial for maintaining that healthy dopamine balance.
It's all connected.
Okay, and that includes managing stress, which, as you can imagine,
Yeah.
can have a significant impact on dopamine levels.
Huge.
Stress is definitely something I need to work on.
Right.
Like, I feel like I'm constantly on edge.
Well, chronic stress can actually deplete your dopamine reserves.
Oh, no.
So finding healthy ways to cope, whether it's meditation, spending time in nature, or simply taking breaks throughout the day,
Okay.
is essential.
Yeah. Speaking of spending time in nature,
Yes.
one of the sources mentioned that even something as simple as sunlight exposure can boost dopamine.
Sunlight helps regulate dopamine production and even increases the density of dopamine receptors in the brain.
So that feeling of joy and energy I get after a sunny walk,
Mm-hmm.
that's not just in my head.
Not at all. It's dopamine working its magic.
Dopamine magic, I like it.
And this might surprise you, but one of the sources mentioned cold showers as a way to boost dopamine.
Cold shower.
Cold showers.
Really?
It's a great example of what's called hormesis,
Hormesis.
where a bit of discomfort or stress can lead to long-term positive effects,
Okay.
including a dopamine boost.
Well, I'm always up for trying something new, especially if it involves boosting my dopamine levels.
Right.
And let's not underestimate the power of setting and achieving goals.
Well, that's a big one.
Right.
Each time you accomplish something, your brain releases dopamine, reinforcing that sense of accomplishment.
It's like a positive feedback loop.
Exactly.
Achieving goals leads to that dopamine surge,
Yeah,
which then fuels further motivation to set and achieve more goals.
precisely.
Cool.
And finally, don't underestimate the power of social connection.
Oh, social connection.
Positive social interactions,
Right.
whether it's spending time with loved ones,
Yeah.
engaging in meaningful conversations,
Right.
or simply lending a helping hand
Mm.
can trigger the release of dopamine.
So maybe instead of like scrolling through social media endlessly,
Huh?
I should actually pick up the phone and call a friend.
That sounds like a much more dopamine-friendly way to spend your time.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
But how do we put this all into practice?
So,
Is it about constantly chasing those dopamine highs?
that's an important question, and it leads us to a crucial point.
Okay,
It's not about constantly chasing intense dopamine surges.
gotcha.
It's about finding that sweet spot, that balance where you're getting enough dopamine to feel motivated and engaged, but not so much that you're on a roller coaster of highs and lows.
So how do we find that sweet spot? Is there a magic formula?
No magic formula, unfortunately.
Okay.
But a key strategy is to be mindful of those quick fix dopamine hits that might be sabotaging our long-term goals and well-being.
Okay, are you talking about things like binge-watching TV shows, mindlessly scrolling through social media,
Yeah,
reaching for that bag of chips when we're stressed?
exactly.
Okay.
While these activities might give us a temporary dopamine boost,
Mm-hmm.
they often leave us feeling drained and dissatisfied in the long run.
Okay.
It's about recognizing those patterns and making conscious choices
Right.
to prioritize activities that offer more sustainable, fulfilling rewards.
So swapping out that mindless scrolling for a walk in the park,
Yeah,
maybe a creative project or a meaningful conversation.
that's the idea.
Okay, cool.
It's about becoming more intentional with our choices and understanding how they might be impacting our dopamine balance.
This is all so insightful.
Good.
I'm already starting to think about my own habits
Uh-huh.
and how I might be able to tweak them to cultivate a healthier relationship with dopamine.
That's fantastic to hear.
Yeah.
And remember, everyone's different.
Mm-hmm.
What works for one person might not work for another.
Okay.
It's about experimenting, finding what feels good for you,
Yeah.
and making gradual changes over time.
So it's all about that personalized approach.
Exactly.
And speaking of personalized approaches,
Yes.
we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive already.
We have.
But hold on tight,
Okay.
because we've got much more to explore.
All right.
Next, we'll delve into the fascinating and complex world of dopamine and addiction.
Oh, okay.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back.
Are you
Before we jump into other fascinating aspects of dopamine, we were discussing the idea of finding that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Getting enough dopamine to feel motivated and engaged without veering into the territory of unhealthy habits or addiction.
Right. And speaking of addiction,
Yes,
it's clear that dopamine plays a major role in this complex issue.
definitely.
Can you walk us through how exactly that works?
Of course.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about dopamine being all about reward and reinforcement?
Yes.
When we do something pleasurable, our brains release dopamine,
Mm-hmm.
and that pleasurable feeling makes us want to do it again.
Right. It's like our brain's way of giving us a little pat on the back, saying, hey, that was great. Let's do that again.
Exactly. But here's where things take a turn.
Okay.
Addictive substances and behaviors actually hijack this reward system.
Mm.
They flood the brain with unusually high levels of dopamine,
Yeah.
creating an intensely pleasurable experience that's really tough to resist.
So it's not just that these things are enjoyable.
Right.
It's that they're actually manipulating our brain's natural reward circuitry.
Precisely. And to make matters more complicated over time, the brain adapts to these artificially high levels of dopamine.
It starts to need more and more of the substance or behavior to achieve that same level of pleasure,
Okay.
a phenomenon we call tolerance.
And that's when things can really start to spiral out of control.
They could
You're
not-
no longer engaging in the behavior for the enjoyment.
Right.
You're doing it just to feel normal
Mm.
or to avoid those uncomfortable withdrawal symptoms.
You've hit the nail on the head. That's the hallmark of addiction.
Okay.
When a behavior becomes compulsive,
Uh-huh.
when you lose control over it, despite knowing the negative consequences.
One of the sources mentioned that even everyday things,
Yeah.
like junk food or constantly checking social media,
Uh-huh.
can trigger these dopamine spikes.
They can?
So does that mean we can become addicted to practically anything?
That's an important question.
It is.
It's crucial to distinguish between a true addiction,
Okay.
which requires a clinical diagnosis,
Uh-huh.
and having strong preferences or habits. Not everyone who enjoys a piece of cake or spends time on social media is addicted. But it does make me wonder, how can we tell if our dopamine system is out of whack?
Uh-huh.
Are there any warning signs we should be aware of?
Absolutely. Some red flags to watch out for include feeling constantly restless or agitated, having trouble concentrating, experiencing strong cravings or urges, engaging in risky or impulsive behaviors,
Okay.
or needing more and more of a particular substance or activity
Oh,
to feel satisfied.
so if I find myself like constantly checking my phone, feeling anxious when I can't access social media, needing that extra cup of coffee just to function,
Yeah.
those could be signs that my dopamine system needs some attention.
It's certainly worth considering.
Yeah.
And if you're concerned, it's always a good idea to talk to a healthcare professional.
All right, so let's say we recognize some of our habits are throwing our dopamine balance off.
Okay.
What are some steps we can take to get back on track?
The good news is that we have plenty of tools at our disposal to help us regain control and foster a healthier relationship with dopamine.
I'm ready to hear those actionable tips. Where should we start?
One of the most effective approaches is to focus on those natural dopamine boosters we discussed earlier,
Okay,
like
sure.
exercise, a balanced diet, quality sleep, stress management techniques, and spending time outdoors. These activities can help regulate your dopamine levels and reduce your dependence on those quick fix dopamine hits.
So it's about creating a lifestyle that naturally supports healthy dopamine function.
Yes.
Rather than constantly chasing those artificial highs.
Exactly.
No.
Another essential strategy is mindfulness.
Mindfulness.
Paying attention to your thoughts, feelings, and cravings without judgment.
Oh.
The key is to observe them rather than reacting impulsively.
So when that urge to grab a sugary treat or check social media hits, instead of giving in,
Right.
you pause, acknowledge the craving,
Uh-huh.
and then consciously decide how you want to respond.
You got it. It sounds simple, but it can be incredibly powerful. Mindfulness helps you create space between the craving and the action, giving you more control over your choices.
That's a game changer.
It is.
It's about regaining control and not letting our dopamine cravings dictate our behavior.
Exactly. And building on that idea of taking control.
Mm-hmm.
Another powerful technique is to find healthy substitutes for those unhealthy dopamine triggers.
Like swapping that bag of chips when you're feeling stressed for a walk in the park, listening to your favorite music, or calling a friend.
Exactly. It's about finding activities that bring you genuine satisfaction and reward without the negative consequences.
And I imagine setting and achieving goals plays a big role in this as well.
Absolutely. Remember how we talked about how accomplishing a goal, even a small one, triggers a dopamine release that reinforces your sense of accomplishment and keeps you motivated.
So we're building that positive feedback loop again.
Exactly.
Setting realistic goals.
Yeah.
Celebrating those successes and letting that dopamine boost fuel further progress.
Precisely. And remember, it doesn't have to be about those huge, ambitious goals. Even small, everyday accomplishments can do the trick.
I love that. It's about noticing those little wins throughout the day and recognizing how far we've come.
Exactly. And here's a final tip that I think is incredibly important. Don't hesitate to seek support if you need it.
Support.
Addiction is a complex issue.
Yes.
And it's often incredibly challenging to navigate alone. Remember, there are many resources available, like therapist support groups and online communities, all dedicated to providing guidance and support on your journey to recovery.
That's such an important reminder.
It is.
It's okay to ask for help.
Yes.
And there are people out there who understand what you're going through and are ready to offer their support.
Absolutely. And remember, recovery is a journey, not a destination. There will be ups and downs along the way.
Yeah.
But with persistence and the right support, you can regain control over your dopamine and live a healthier, more fulfilling life.
This conversation has been so eye-opening. I'm learning so much about the power of dopamine.
Good.
And how it influences everything from our motivation to our choices to our overall well-being.
It's truly a fascinating field.
It is.
And we're only just beginning to understand the complexities of this powerful neurotransmitter.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the science behind dopamine to its role in addiction, and most importantly, some practical strategies for finding that dopamine sweet spot.
Right.
But before we wrap things up,
Okay.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on one final question.
Okay. What is it?
Do you believe consciously managing our dopamine could be the key to unlocking greater motivation, focus, and even happiness?
What a fantastic question. While there's still much more to learn, I believe the answer is a resounding yes.
A resounding yes.
By understanding how dopamine works.
Recognizing our individual triggers and making intentional choices to support a healthy dopamine balance, we absolutely have the potential to unlock greater possibilities in all areas of our lives.
That's a powerful thought.
It is.
It's not just about hacking our dopamine.
Right.
It's about harnessing its power to create lives that are truly meaningful and fulfilling.
You've got it. And as you go about your day, I encourage you to pay attention to your own dopamine experience. Notice what sparks those feelings of reward and motivation. Observe your patterns and habits. And start to experiment with different ways to cultivate a healthier and more balanced relationship with this incredible neurotransmitter.
This deep dive has given us so much to think about. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating journey into the world of dopamine.
We've talked a lot about the importance of finding that dopamine sweet spot. Not too much, not too little. But is there an ideal level of dopamine we should all be aiming for?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Oh, okay.
Everyone's baseline dopamine levels are different.
Right.
What feels balanced for one person might not feel right for another.
So there's no magic number.
Right.
We can check on a dopamine meter.
Not quite. It's more about tuning into how you feel, noticing patterns in your behavior, and then making adjustments based on your individual needs.
So if you're feeling constantly drained and unmotivated, it could be a sign that your dopamine levels are too low.
It could be.
And you might need to incorporate some of those dopamine boosting strategies we talked about.
That's exactly right. And on the flip side, if you're feeling restless, impulsive, or constantly seeking out intense stimulation, it could indicate that your dopamine levels are too high, and you might need to dial things back a bit.
So it's all about finding that balance, that sweet spot where you feel energized, focused, and content without feeling like you're on a constant dopamine roller coaster.
Precisely. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
Okay.
Your dopamine needs might fluctuate depending on different factors like stress levels, sleep quality, or even the time of year.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So it's not about reaching some perfect state of dopamine bliss and staying there forever. It's about being adaptable and making adjustments as needed.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a mindful awareness of your own dopamine system.
Okay.
And learning how to work with it instead of against it.
One last thought I wanted to touch on is this idea that dopamine isn't just about seeking pleasure.
Oh, interesting.
It's also about avoiding pain. Could you elaborate on that a bit?
Absolutely. Dopamine is often linked to reward and pleasure, but it also plays a crucial role in motivating us to avoid things that are unpleasant or painful.
So, for example, if we're feeling stressed or anxious, our brains might release dopamine when we engage in behaviors that help us cope or escape those feelings,
Right.
like checking social media or reaching for comfort food.
Exactly.
Okay.
And while these behaviors might offer temporary relief,
Yeah.
they can become problematic
Okay.
if there are go-to coping mechanisms.
Because they're not addressing the root of the problem.
Right.
They're just providing a temporary dopamine fix.
Precisely. That's why it's so important to develop healthy coping strategies
Okay.
that don't rely on those quick fix dopamine hits.
Right.
Things like exercise, mindfulness, spending time in nature, or connecting with loved ones can help regulate our dopamine levels
Right.
and build resilience when we're facing stress.
So it's about finding ways to soothe ourselves and manage discomfort without falling into those dopamine traps.
Exactly. It's about building a toolkit of healthy coping strategies that support our long-term well-being rather than just providing a temporary escape.
This conversation has been so enlightening. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of dopamine and the incredible influence it has on our lives.
It's a fascinating topic.
It is.
And remember, there's still so much more to uncover about this fascinating neurotransmitter. New research is emerging all the time.
So it's an invitation to keep exploring,
Yes.
to keep learning, and to keep experimenting with what works best for each of us.
Absolutely. I'll leave you with one final thought to ponder.
Okay, lay it on me.
What if consciously managing our dopamine isn't just about feeling better or being more productive?
Okay.
What if it's about becoming more fully ourselves?
Interesting.
About unlocking our true potential and living lives that are aligned with our deepest values and aspirations?
That's a beautiful thought.
It is.
It's not just about hacking our dopamine. It's about harnessing its power to create lives that are truly meaningful and fulfilling.
Precisely as you navigate your day, I encourage you to pay attention to your own dopamine experience.
Yeah.
Notice what triggers those feelings of reward and motivation. Observe your own patterns and habits, and start experimenting with ways to cultivate a healthier, more balanced relationship with this remarkable neurochemical.
This deep dive has given us so much to think about. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the fascinating world of dopamine. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Deep Thoughts Podcast. I hope you found insights and inspiration to take with you on your journey of self-growth. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to follow us on social media to stay updated on new releases and exclusive content. See you next time, where we'll continue to help you grow and explore your full potential.